feel like I need to set up music or something whenever we're in our little waiting period.
So like awkward silence thing. You know, maybe we should find an artist to come up with an ARAC theme song for us.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun.
When I used to do Goody Night with Daniel, our theme song was one that he made, and it was a really, really catchy song.
Was it?
And we'd play it at the beginning of every show as people were coming in.
Fun. You should find that soundbite and share it.
Yes, I will.
We had our decompression ride, and my son and I really bond over music, and we went down a rabbit hole of mashups. That was really good.
Do you know how many people requested links for this one?
I want to say it was around 10.
Okay.
I know I did 4 additional this afternoon.
Okay.
What time is, should we give them 1 more minute?
Sure.
5:30. Oh, well, just turned 5:35. 10 more seconds.
Yeah, I think, well, it's recording, so technically I could get started.
We could, and then if anyone wants a link, hopefully we can get those shared.
And I can just start with an intro, and then even though I think everyone in the audience right now knows me, so, but yeah, okay, we'll just get started. So for folks who are hanging out in our little room here, this is kind of open format, open discussion. I think for myself and coming up with some of these workshops, I just wanted to address some of the stuff that I felt like as an artist wasn't being addressed in larger conversations. And so hopefully putting together this presentation, sending out the recording or posting it somewhere for folks who want to see it. And also just getting ideas and feedback from the community on how it could be expanded. And, you know, if folks have stories or experiences that they want to share and we can collectively brainstorm too, that's a part of this. So yeah, I'm Muriel Villiard. I'm a visual artist. I have a part-time gig here at the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council, helping Holly, who's the other person, the other staff on the call here today. And yeah, I get to help people connect with grants and different resources in the community. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Holly.
I am Holly Hackett-Rich. I am the Director of Grants and Outreach for the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council. Mary, we are so happy to have her join us now, and we are self-professed grant geeks, and we are having a really good time planning outreach. So like she said, if you know you want a subject or a topic or want to know more, and please at any time unmute, ask questions. This is mostly Mary's baby here. When I was an active artist, I didn't have to worry about so many of the things that happen now. So I am looking forward to this. And please share your experiences if you've been trolled or exploited in any way. So I am here for support. Mary, I will mute and jump in whenever you want or need.
Cool beans. Alrighty, artist exploitation. Oof. So kind of, there was a couple different ways I wanted to approach this with. I'm just going to start with like a brief overview of traditional like scams and stuff that happens over the internet, because I've been seeing a lot of artists posting and asking like, is this a real person? How can I tell? Things like that. And it's just something I've noticed that especially visual artists are facing. So I just wanted to go through a brief overview of those old school kind of scams that are still happening today. And then I broke off into payment and value exploitation. So that's more along the lines of if you're working with a client or an institution, and the practices that I've run into and other people have shared with me in multiple genres of art. So not just visual art, but music and writing. A little overview of isms, different like specific isms that play a part in exploitation of people. And then a conversation at the end of basically how to say no for artists who need a refresher on that, or some cheerleading on being able to continue that, and then some preventative measures that I've been thinking about as far as how do we protect each other in the community as artists, and how do we support each other through all of these different kinds of exploitation. Yes, so a common scam that's been happening in the visual art community are these emails, and they're usually, people with 2 first names, very generic names. They've been getting past like different scam filters. It reads, "Hi, hope you're doing fine. I was searching the internet for an artist or sculptor, and then I saw your profile through Google. Do you have any artwork or sculpture that is readily available for sale? I would appreciate if you could send me some of your work with their sizes and prices. Thank you, regards." And then it says it's virus free, so very trustworthy. But yeah, some of the key things to kind of take note, again, as I mentioned, usually there's 2 first names, or that they have emails now that are pretty, like, they look like regular emails. It's not like the olden days where it was a series of numbers and random things that a computer came up with. Red flags for artists to look out for are when people say they were searching the internet and they found you on Google, and there's no like specific connection to you. Like anyone could, take that action. It doesn't really give you a lot of details of how they found you. A lot of artists who get these emails also don't have like websites. So it's sort of an interesting thing when they mention that you're being found on Google. They won't specify what kind of artist you are. They're just saying they want some art. So obviously if they found, your work, a real client is going to be, telling you, hey, I saw maybe something specific in your work that I liked, or at least referencing the actual medium that you use. So again, they repeatedly do that in this email. And then I'd appreciate if you could send me some of your work with their sizes and prices. So it's kind of just asking for this over this very general like list of the stuff that you have, as if, if you do have a website, as if they didn't look through that. So yeah, let's see. I actually looked into a lot of different videos and stories on what actually happens when you respond to these. Because my concern as an artist was always like, oh, they're gonna, take my information in some way. But it's a very specific sort of scam where they won't accept electronic payments or methods or credit cards due to sharing a bank account with their partner. So another example of the email is, I'm buying a gift for my wife, or, it's so-and-so's birthday and I want to have this piece of art by a certain deadline. So they give you a deadline, but they're very specific about how they want to pay you. And I was watching these videos, and they actually do send checks to artists. And so they will send a check, and the amount on the check will actually be more than what they said in the email. And so artists receive these checks of like, $1,000 or $1,400, and they're like, oh, this person overpaid me. What do I do? They go to deposit the check. And within that time frame of the check being deposited, the person will reach out and say, oh, I realize I overpaid you. Could you send some of the money back and like reimburse me? Like that was a mistake that I made. And also, this birthday is coming up, or this deadline is coming up. I need you to do like that refund right away, or else, my partner's not going to get their birthday gift, and then I'm going to be really angry. And so these emails actually can go on at length, and I'll post a couple of the links maybe after this. But yeah, obviously then they end up taking your real money through the refund, and then they deposit that and then their check bounces. And I've also seen examples where there's like copyright infringement emails. So they'll like send out an email saying that your artwork has been is in violation of copyright laws, and they're taking legal action of some kind.
And that's just an empty threat.
Yeah, and I don't know. They're like, they want you to pay them off in order to not have to take any legal ramifications. So these are a couple. This is a really good, anatomy of an email art scam. And both of these guys kind of trolled the artist scammers. So I'll post those, like the actual links in the chat, but just an interesting thing that's been happening lately. So now we got real humans, when real people actually try and exploit you. And a lot of these examples will kind of focus on, the fact that people try to get more for less in life. And in the art world, that's not really any different. And these actions are usually perpetuated by, myths around the starving artist. I think a lot of it comes from a lack of education around the arts and the value of the arts and the work that goes into the arts. Stereotypes in the media, again, that starving artist thing. And then, people just not valuing their own work. Some general examples. So we had kind of a robust conversation on Facebook when I posted about like, share some examples of stuff that bothers you as an artist. A lot of people brought up scope creep, which is kind of like where a client, specific, I think this happens a lot in graphic design especially, but where a client will, you'll submit some of your work and then the client will be like, oh, can you do a little bit more? Can you add a little bit extra? And it's beyond like the edits that you were originally agreeing on. But they're sometimes like withholding your pay unless you fix it in the way that they want. Harassment is a huge thing, especially I think for I would say especially for young and female identifying artists. Let's see, paying for the award or the publication. So there's a lot of examples in the art world where artists who are just starting out will get accepted into different, publications, or they'll be told that they're given this award. And then at the end of it, they end up having to pay for that. And that's kind of, the award doesn't really actually mean anything. It's just somebody's, again, sort of scam to take artists' money.
And that one puts me in the mind of, because we've seen quite a bit lately where people are applying for grants and they're applying for entry fees that are like $1,000 to enter into artworks, which we have a policy against that because that is also exploitation. That is not. So that one's real hot and heavy right now.
Yeah. And I think it's good that, foundations are pointing that out in the descriptions of grants, reminding people like, hey, excessive entry fees are concerning, and, reaching out to artists when that's a red flag in people's applications. Other folks mentioned, clients writing long emails and not mentioning the pay anywhere. So, if you think about it as an artist, you're putting in all of this time to read through this really lengthy email. And at least for me as a visual artist, when people send me really long emails, I will like long descriptive emails, my art brain starts working and I start seeing the images and I start seeing the pictures, and that's like work. It's like a superpower, but it's also like an exhausting one. And so when you get through that whole email and then you have no idea if you're actually going to get, what you're worth out of that email in the form of payment, that can be really frustrating, because then you have to go through the work of like, reaching out again, responding, and negotiating that budget stuff. And some people go to a lot of lengths to be very like non-transparent about budget. So that's kind of a red flag, I think, for a lot of artists. Obviously, work for exposure is a controversial one sometimes because, on the one hand, yes, exposure can be great. I think for specific artists, And for people who, especially artists, like for me, I have taken a lot of exposure work, but I'm also an extrovert. And so like when I get those opportunities to be in public and to like connect with people, like I know how to use that to my benefit. And make sure I make the most of that. But if you're, you know, an artist who doesn't feel comfortable, you know, doing the work in that space for yourself, then I don't think the exposure opportunities are always worth it. And then there's also the fact that there's like a power imbalance there of like the client or the person that's requesting you to do the work for exposure is obviously gaining something from you. And you always want to make sure that you're not, you know, giving more than you're receiving in those sort of situations.
And this is something we've been talking a lot about for the last couple of years too, is that people have to state their value. and even if, like, say, you know, if you are sharing your talents with someone, if you do something for exposure or whatever, be sure to let them know how much that retails at. Be sure to let them know that you know your value. We talk with different like public organizations and things like that, and we say no more. You don't ask people to do this for free. A person doesn't just wake up out of nowhere with this amazing talent. It's things that people go to school for. It's what they work at every day. It's you know, it's work, and it needs to be viewed as such. So know that we have your back on that. I'm sorry, I see the excessive fees now. I already brought it up.
It's all good. Excessive entry fees, which we talked about, and then generally like a lack of credit on stuff you're participating in, and people don't use your name. Some more field specific examples. Some artists shared with me in the visual art world, like people using photos of you or your work in action, or you or your work as sort of like an action shot. And so like your imagery is being used kind of indirectly to promote what they're doing, but it's not, you know, sometimes it's credited, sometimes it's not. But like when there's the element of not being asked for permission, or an organization is, you know, I don't know, organizations tend to can get into kind of a gray area with that. And one thing that I have faced as a visual artist and as a public artist is like the process of submitting a lot of like preliminary sketches. And for me personally, like if I have like everything sort of in writing and, you know, an agreement in place that confirms that I'm going to be the artist working with the institution or the client, then I'm a little, you know, I'm more comfortable doing some of the sketch work that's involved in drafting and design, or you know, a sketch of a work. But there was instances like, you know, with the city of Duluth, where my Chief Buffalo project, I had to like confront the commissioners because there was a request that like, oh, well, you should just submit some more sketches and designs of your work so we can see what it's going to look like. And I'm like, well, you haven't even given me the, you know, there was no, they couldn't give me a yes or a no on whether or not it was possible to do the work. And so I wasn't about to do like more unpaid labor just to prove the point. And I understand like in grants and things like that, like you're taking your own risk in like submitting a work sample or submitting an idea. But I do think there's a line, especially in the public art world and in other spaces. And I think other people have mentioned too, like being careful about giving away too much of a final design or too much of a complete design, because that always runs the risk of like being taken in some way. Musician folks who commented on my thread talked about payment and drinks, which I think is definitely a huge issue in our drinking culture in Minnesota. You know, they want bands and performers to come and just, you know, do the work, provide the entertainment, you know, attract all these people to be patrons in these bars. And then they're like, here, you can get paid in alcohol. And that's obviously an incredibly unfortunate practice that I think a lot of musicians, and especially lesser known musicians, face. Another issue in the music realm that I've noted over the years is tokenism, you know, in Duluth, I feel like we had the issue for a while of different venues only booking people of color on like Wednesday and Sunday nights. And so like being very selective about like what audiences that they bring in. And I think I'll talk about that in a future slide. Obviously with writing, use of content without author attribution. I remember when I was a kid and I was really interested in poetry and I submitted to poetry.com, you know, sounds like an official website. And they told me all my poems were accepted for this publication. And I was very excited as a 17, 16-year-old kid. And then you get the follow-up email that says, oh, well, in order to confirm that you're going to be in this book, like we need you to buy the book. And, you know, and if you don't, then, well, you know, it was a whole thing. And so being careful of spaces that will use your writing and then make you pay to actually, you know, see your work or include your work. So this is where the presentation hopefully gets a little bit more interesting. There's a lot of gray area, and I know Wendy Savage, who's on the call right now, she's talked a lot about the art auction issue and how that, you know, with a lot of nonprofits will use these art auctions to fundraise for their different activities and for these great causes. But a lot of the time those auctions end up lowering the value of the artwork kind of at a market level by offering it at a price much lower than the retail value. And I've seen a lot of artists who felt, you know, again, exploited by that practice, especially when, you know, their work, which maybe ordinarily they price at like $500, gets sold for $50. And then that kind of sets the precedent for artists to, for their work to be kind of expected to be available at that cost at all times. And, you know, that conversation started happening on Facebook, and someone mentioned, you know, to make sure that you keep receipts and proof for your own personal tax purposes. If you're going to participate in an art auction, like make sure that you are keeping track of the value of the actual work and, you know, use that for tax purposes. And let's see, art contests. So competitions where you submit your completed idea or design for a real product. I have a friend who, you know, she's basically the one who taught me graphic design in a lot of ways, or taught me the more technical side of graphic design. And she submitted to do a beer label at a brewery. And it was a whole contest, and they ended up getting like hundreds of like works of art from people to design this one label for a beer. And so, you know, the client is basically bypassing the actual process of working with an artist and valuing their work. And at the end of that process, you know, they're only offering what, $500 for a label that's going to go on so many thousands of cans of beer and sell so many products. And so those can be really tricky. An experience from when I was younger, I used to really look out for contests like this when I was just learning graphic design. And so I do think there was a benefit. Even though it was exploitive, there also was a benefit of like when you're an artist and you're looking for prompts and stuff, contests can sometimes be a fun way to practice with the potential of getting paid. You know, we don't always get paid to practice. So it's definitely got its pros and cons, and it's got gray area. And then specialized skills without specialized pay. So the example of, you know, a client is asking for different types of work in addition to the work you're doing. For example, asking you to kind of write your own grant for your own pay, or asking you to create advertising for your own show at a gallery. And I think sometimes, you know, this is necessary, especially if you're working in a smaller community or with a smaller institution. And like for me, I'm always willing to just do my own graphic design for my own shows and things like that to keep with what little branding that I actually have as an artist. But I still think it's a slippery slope to, you know, for galleries and venues to always expect you to pull, you know, sort of that end of the work, especially when spaces have like their own social media and PR folks and things like that. So just kind of a reminder to assess what you're comfortable with. The isms, obviously, there's a lot of intersectionality here, and this is by no means a complete list, but just an overview of things I've seen. So as I was talking about with like musicians, you know, the issue that was prevalent in Duluth for a while was booking BIPOC artists and musicians in unpopular seasons or on weekdays or on like times when there's not a lot of people in the space. And, you know, I think there's also a level of like, you know, that's racist in that way, but it's also racist from the standpoint of some venues. I feel like, you know, I've seen the issue of like, they don't like large crowds of people of color coming to their establishments. So they make sure to just like not alienate the rest of the usuals that come. And so that's a thing. There's like a nightclub here, you know, I won't say which, but you know, my husband and I would go out dancing, and one time the DJ told us like, hey, we're not gonna we requested a hip hop song, and he said, we're not gonna play hip hop music because there was Black people who got into a fight on the dance floor. You know, for us, we're like, okay, but people who listen to country music get into fights. Like, you're not banning country music from your establishment. So things like that I've seen that have been really, you know, uncomfortable and wrong. Yeah, so ageism. So a lot of the time I work with a lot of younger artists because of this. Because a lot of the time, like, we expect young people to work for free or work for experience or like undervalue their work. When I had my show at Bemidji recently, it was like amazing to see the work of, they have a youth show up there right now at the Watermark Gallery. And it was really amazing to see like hundreds of pieces of work by youth. And, you know, you walk through there and I swear at least 30 of those kids could have their own solo show right now. Like, they could sell their work right now. I don't think age should be the indicator for what the value of your work is. Like, if you're working at the level of, you know, professional artists or very close to it as far as quality, you should be able to charge those rates. There was another youth that I was mentoring who mentioned in like the tattoo world, she wanted to be a tattoo artist, and she brought up that she was concerned about the hazing that happens in the tattoo community. And maybe in this ageism realm, it's kind of a reminder to talk to our youth and reach out to them, because I told her, like, do not go near a space that's going to do like, you know, stuff against your will and hurt you, or, you know, force you to do things you don't want to do, force you to do unpaid labor in the form of an apprenticeship. I think there's a lot of opportunities that you can pursue as far as like for myself, I've written grants to work with people who are, you know, at a professional level, or to request critique, and also to pay them. And so there's ways in this, you know, tying it to the grant writing world to actually get paid what you're worth as a younger person to learn. And so I just kind of reminded her, like, don't put yourself in those, those situations.
I would say too, just representing the older generation, that it goes both ways too, because I think there's a lot of older artists that maybe because of their age, or maybe, you know, being an artist wasn't their main gig, and they get close to retirement and then start their arts career. And then especially if somebody isn't very savvy with tech and the ways of today, that it doesn't, you know, ageism for older people is a very real thing as well.
Yeah, I didn't get to put that in the little bullet point list, but definitely I think ageism is both sides of the spectrum, and I think it's wrong no matter no matter what. Yeah, or yeah, like you said, there's a lot of older artists who get a start much later in life on their career, and you know, they get undervalued just like a younger artist might be. Anyone early in their career really gets put into awkward positions. And hopefully at the end we'll talk more about solutions. Not to it's a rainy, cloudy day, and we're talking about exploitation. Sexism.
A big sunshine discussion at the end.
Yeah, to wear bright colors today.
I know, and I'm suiting the day. You're much better.
Yeah, sexism. So opportunity, if the opportunity only exists if you engage in a personal relationship with the client. That was the story of my early 20s. A lot of opportunities that presented themselves, especially to, you know, well, and the second thing, collaborations that aren't mutually beneficial. So this pertains to, I guess, a lot of different spaces. In my personal experience, it was a lot of older male artists who would say, hey, like, I want to collaborate with you. And like, as a young artist, I'm like, whoa, yeah, like this, you know, major professional wants to work with me. And then it ends up having like ulterior motives to it. But yeah, also, yeah. Or people who, yeah, you all know. I don't think I need to get into that one too much. And then interesting sort of, I don't know if you call it a paradox, but you know, expecting people facing any of these issues to be the ones to fix them, often for free, is also exploitive. So, you know, being like, share your experience like in depth, and you know, thanks. I'm not gonna get, you know, pay you or you know, compensate you in any way for your time and the data that I have mined from you, or the solutions I have mined from you. So I'm grateful to be here at ARAC, where I can talk about these things, and it's not for free. It's for free for everybody to view, but like, you know, I can also pay rent while talking about important issues.
We're very careful not to exploit you, Mira.
Yeah. Again, tokenism is possible across all of these isms. I didn't discuss I did talk about ageism. Ableism is the other one, and geography. I think there's more examples to be discussed in that area. It's awkward sometimes, but saying no should not negatively impact your future access to other opportunities. That is like the key takeaway for any emerging artists watching, or who will be watching. I know everyone here is very established right now. And then, yeah, here's the more sunny side of this presentation, which is preventative measures to practice. Let's see, I think this is, yeah. So even though, you know, in a perfect world, exploitation wouldn't exist, it does. And so as artists, at all stages in our lives and in our careers, we have to learn to talk about these things, and address them and keep an eye out for them. And so, yeah, it's important to establish some practices to protect yourself and your work. The most obvious example being getting things in writing. I think something I tell any artist who asks any questions about, you know, working for clients or on commission, a good or a real client is not offended by a contract, period. If they don't have one ready, have your own template ready and just tell them it's part of the business. This is how you work as a professional. I have so many regrettable examples still, even though I preach all of this stuff, I have still felt, you know, compelled sometimes to skip the contract part, and I almost maybe 85% of the time regret it, to be frank. And this happens a lot too, like for artists of color or who are working in, you know, Native communities too. Like you want to be able to support maybe an organization or an institution or a client from your own community, and so you just think it can be based on community trust, and I've had a couple examples where I've just been like, yeah, I'll do the logo design. And then I spend so many hours doing the logo for a specific, tribal institution. And then you get ghosted, and you don't get those hours back that you worked on something. And so as nice as it feels to be able to offer your own community work for free or like on a trust basis, even in close relationships with like friends and stuff, I've had friends not pay me on time, or things come up and things like that. And so I'm still trying to make it my policy 99% of the time to have something in writing somewhere. Just at least not so much as a legal thing, for bigger institutions, yes, it's a legal thing, but like for individual clients, sometimes it's just nice to have that little reminder there of like, this is how much it costed, like you agreed to this in writing, please be a good person. And I think the magic of contracts for folks who are anxious about suggesting them is that they ensure benefits for both parties. There's a benefit to the client or to the commissioner or whoever is requesting work or performance from you. This is ensuring that you're going to do it, and so it's not just something that benefits you.
I think if you put that positive spin on things too, and tell the person, this is just my policy, I do this with everybody, and then everyone is clear on agreement and there's no misunderstandings. And I don't know, I think maybe I need a contract for my marriage. These kinds of things would be just like, listen, we both agreed to these things, so it's for everyone's benefit. But it's true, and I think if a lot of it is in how you phrase it and how you approach it, and if you just do that in that positive manner, like it's no big deal, it's just how it is. And if we all do that, if we all make that part of our practice, we just train everyone to accept that. Anyone who is hiring you, anyone who's getting your work, any of it. And any, like she said, any good client, any respectable person will have zero issue with it. It's a person who's like, no, I thought we agreed on this, or you said that, or I clearly said this. No, it's just better, get it all in writing. Everyone's happier in the end.
Yeah. And I feel like too, getting a little bit back to that cultural component, I think that's one thing confusing about like Western kind of colonizer culture is like, I feel like a lot of the bureaucracy and the paperwork and having contracts kind of stems from that part of the culture. But then I don't know, it's interesting how there's also so many people that like still don't as a dominant culture thing, there's so many people that still don't respect it. I don't know, it's interesting.
Well, they take it sometimes as an affront, and again, that's the person. If you just let them know, like you said, this is for your safety and mine, it ensures that I'm going to hold up my end of the deal, you hold up yours, and it's just, let people know. We just have to start saying this is common practice,
right?
And they either have to get with the times, or they're just going to continue to show themselves as why wouldn't they? Only if they wanted to be conniving in some way,
right?
And I'm sorry, but like you said, so it's like your culture is what mandates all of this. So right. I'm playing to you and you're going to play by the rules.
Right. Yeah. Watermark.
And also, if anyone ever needs someone to yell at them about, don't expect artists to do things for free. I do a lot of that now. You pay people. So if anyone's giving you the business, I will come and mama bear them for you.
Yeah, watermarks, obvious one, kind of old school, but effective to some extent in protecting your visual art, at least in kind of like to some extent in the internet age. I know like a very talented, not even terribly talented, but some artists are able to bootleg images off the internet and just, erase things. And we have AI and all sorts of tools of erasing watermarks, but, not a bad practice to have when you're, posting a lot of your work in spaces. And then, as we mentioned before, for those art auctions, keeping those receipts, making sure that the value of your artwork is listed somewhere. This is my favorite sort of solution to rely on for these kinds of issues and exploitation. I found a lot of, even in the process of making this presentation, like having all this input from people who are willing to share their stories and things that they want to hear about and things that they think are important for emerging artists, especially to hear about. It's just really cool to be able to rely on community in that way. So I relied on cohorts, like cohorts of, sometimes when you get a grant, you get put into a cohort, and being able to like talk through in a group of other people who are doing similar work can be really helpful and reassuring, especially when you're like first learning to say no, hearing other people's stories. There's a lot of really cool groups on Facebook and utilizing social media. I've seen groups of like women musicians specifically. I'm not sure how I got put in one of those groups, but I'm in a couple of them, and they post like different opportunities for women musicians, and they also have like threads about what are spaces where you felt unsafe or uncomfortable or encountered audiences that just were a no for you and your safety. So having that information kind of circulating in safer spaces is a really great tool. I'm part of a lot of Native artist groups, and those, so I think as part of starting the ACO artist group, and there's been plenty of times where I've been able to post an issue, and for instance, like artwork being used for our city report, not to knock the city too much in this call, but they'd made a report several years ago that was supposed to be the direction of art in our city, and they went in and took artwork from ACO, from the American Indian Community Housing Organization, without asking permission from the artist, without asking permission really in any capacity. Did not credit the artist in the document itself, and then also did not list ACO as a cultural or an art space in the community. And so you have all of this Native artwork being used on their cover of their document and all through the pages, with no connection to where it came from or who made it or anything like that. And then it also almost, you read the document and you're thinking that you can find Native art, like at the time, you're thinking, oh, I can find all this Native art all over Duluth, when really there was only one place at the time where you could. And I share that story because, it was through our Facebook group where, I posted about it. And then, a lot of us got together and went to the commission meeting and confronted this issue together, and discussed that issue. And it's happened to on Angela back in. It's happened to where there was a performance of Peter Pan that was about to happen in our community, and someone reached out to me and asked like if we would do a consultation on if it had removed enough of the racist stereotypes of Native people in it. So I posted in the Facebook group. I was like, who wants to come with me? And unfortunately, we didn't get paid for that work. But we were able to step in and tell them to redo virtually everything about that component of the performance. And this was like the opening week. And so I think Wendy might have been there actually. But yeah, and that was a part of, that post and the email threads that we had going about like who's going to show up and actually, change this situation. And so yeah, there's like countless examples of being able to post in the eco artist group and in different native artist groups and just like rally together and show up in a big group and, you know, confront issues that are happening in the community, whether it's appropriation or, you know, things like that. So grateful for social media for that. Unions are, you know, that more traditional, probably more performing arts world, community solution. Again, problem solving with your peers, encouraging each other, seeking positive mentors, which sometimes can be a slippery slope because sometimes, you know, artists can be wacky people. And, you know, not everybody makes a great mentor, but, you know, sometimes being able to just talk with people who've been through the process of being an emerging artist is really insightful and can be really helpful in getting your footing as an emerging artist. The reminder that we all succeed when we all succeed. So, you know, it's important to, again, support each other. And when you see an issue, like, I just feel like we have to, and this is more the activist side of me, but I feel like we have to really rally together and make sure that we're creating safe spaces for artists and for creatives in this messy space, because everyone's doing just, you know, this amazing, important work. So on the flip side of like writing your own grants, you know, fund your work, write your own grants, pay yourself for your time practicing, pay yourself for your time creating. Like, it's totally doable. Bringing in the ARAC perspective here, like, it's panels these days really love when people, you know, pay themselves for their time, when you're like not a starving artist, when you're not struggling to pay rent, because ultimately those issues are feasibility issues. And, you know, funders, and for the most part, want you to complete what you're doing. And so Holly, if you feel like speaking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it's showing your value, even if you're donating, say, a portion of what you would normally get. If you want to do any of that, but on the budget, always show your full worth, your full value. Because even if you're giving it, then you're saying, you know, I'm willing to give this much towards this project. And it is true. We want everyone to succeed. We want everyone to do well. And so, yeah, no more starving artists. Always include, and if, you know, we have a baseline, it's like $24 an hour, and it's just a ballpark. If you get more than that, claim more than that. But always, always make sure to say, this is what I'm worth.
Yeah. I had another thought on that and it floated away. Let's see, paying yourself, funding your work. Yeah.
You know what else I was going to say too? If you were doing anything for a nonprofit, because I've had this problem lately too, is that someone is where an artist is writing grants to fund a project through a nonprofit. The nonprofit should be writing that grant to pay the artists, because if you do receive a grant, it is taxable income, whereas a nonprofit doesn't have to pay those taxes. So that in and of itself, whether they know or not, that is also exploitation. Now, for instance, if you were doing a project and you had all your commitments and everything, you could still apply for a grant to pay yourself if you are not getting paid through you know, whatever project you're involved in, or not enough to cover your expenses, etc. But don't write grants for organizations that should be writing their own grants.
I'm glad I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, I think also, like, just as a person who served on panels, I feel like a lot of the time panels are generally excited when they see you pay yourself more, you know, for your work. And then I've also, you know, had the experience of, like, if there's a project that you really want to do, it's a passion project and you don't mind working for less, it's still important to maybe like outline maybe how many hours that you're actually putting in, even if they're in kind. to give people a sense of like, this is the amount of work that you're going to put into your grant project. And you know, the level of dedication and comfort that you've got in that realm. You can also put that you're looking to fundraise, you know, more to pay yourself, but that's not necessarily the ultimate goal. You just want to have something to live on from the point at which you get that grant. So yeah, I think I've written quite a few grants like that, where it's like, the project is really important to me. I would just like a livable stipend to do it. And, you know, I'm grateful for what I can get there, because, you know, it's not, the work's going to happen anyway. But again, it'd be nice to not die while you're trying to make your work. And then the last thing under community is organizations like ARAC, Arrowhead Regional Arts Council, organizations like ACO. You know, there's lots of different advocacy groups out there in the arts world who I think it's important to, you know, share what your concerns are, and maybe they have resources to address it. Maybe they can do their own workshop series on a specialized area of exploitation. If there's trusted organizations for you, I think it's important to utilize those resources. And then finally, research. Yeah, there's lots of resources online. You know, Springboard for the Arts is really cool with a lot of their legal resources and webinars that they've been doing. I found, you know, just like in the scam artist portion of this in the beginning, watching videos about other artists' experiences, there's actually a lot of people who share and like post warnings and post reviews of different experiences that they've had or venues they worked at. Look for those experiences directly from the artists, and obviously not all of them are, you know, not 100% of them are going to be completely accurate, but you know, a good majority, if you're seeing like a lot of artists saying the same thing about a specific place or practice, it's a pretty safe bet that, you know, there's some exploitation going on and you don't want to go near it.
There's a pattern. I know that I too like to like Springboard is a wonderful resource, but when I'm just kind of like looking for ideas or those kinds of things too, I like to use Pinterest as my search engine, because it's kind of vetted, because it is also a social media. So people will be like, no, don't go to here. Or, you know, there's a lot more back and forth. It's kind of like it's a little bit safer. Like Instagram, you know, is also good for artists. So to the Instagram and the Pinterest and those specific groups in Facebook too are really good. But I've kind of taken to using Pinterest as my search engine over Google for anything.
Yeah.
Free plug for Pinterest, I guess. Yeah. I get no commissions from Pinterest.
You can trust us. So, yeah. So yeah, looking into your clients' practices and history. This one's kind of interesting. I put little asterisks by things that have a little bit more nuance to them, because I feel like sometimes institutions have had bad leadership, and you know, it's under a bad executive director or a bad panel or a bad board that like stuff gets really weird and hairy, I guess, in the art world. And so making sure that you kind of keep it on top of like maybe who's working at a specific space. And like maybe an organization or a funder burned you 10 years ago with their 20+ year executive director who was there keeping things in the status quo, but then all of a sudden, you know, there's some new people working there or new staff or things like that. You know, organizations aren't people. Although they do have like their histories and their values and their missions, like it's people that run those spaces, and people transition out. So encourage a lot of emerging artists to not feel super hopeless if, you know, there's a situation that doesn't go well or they get burned at an institution. But also talk about those things too, because sometimes it's addressing those things that gets bad leadership out. And then again, asking around, asking seasoned professionals what their experience has been. It's a double-edged sword here with a little asterisk, because I found that some people who have been burned a lot by specific institutions or people or organizations can get a little pessimistic. And so I think I found that a lot as an emerging artist when wanting to talk to people about specific funders and stuff, and they still weren't at a point of like, you know, I'm never going to trust this person or this place again, and wanting to access resources or funding and feeling like maybe I would be judged if I approached that space. So I think there's also, you know, being aware again of that thing of like practices in history can change. It's a fish because I like fish. So yeah, that is the end of my little talking spiel, and wow, that was exactly an hour. So this is our contact information and kind of a list of the other upcoming topics. Again, the next one's going to be marketing and working with the media. We've found that, well, we very much appreciate the stuff that Springboard has been putting out. There's more to the story, and we'd like to do more of a hands-on media relations and marketing workshops. So stay tuned for that. Does anybody have questions or thoughts or things they feel about this presentation? Feel free to unmute or chat. I'm also just very huge, a huge fan of the people in the room today.
I was gonna say, if you wanted to show your faces so we can gush all over you. Or if you wanted to add any experiences that you've had that you'd like to share.
Hi, Miri. I just wanted to say it was a really wonderful presentation. I appreciate all the input and information, you know, that you put into the presentation. I thought it was really informative and helpful. And for me, I come in as both, you know, like a nonprofit and also working artist. So I have experience, you know, from both ends. And I just want to be able to be sure that I am operating, you know, from my role at All My Relations, that's working with artists equitably and, you know, all of that. And then also just my own experience as an artist too. It's helpful to hear from others and continue learning. So thank you for the conversation tonight.
Thanks for coming. Yeah.
And Wendy, I see in the chat too, like examples of contracts. And Mary, I think that's something that maybe we should work up, like simple contracts, simple receipts, and things of that nature to have available on our resources page.
Yeah.
So people don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Actually, hold that thought. I'm going to grab a book really quick.
Okay. You want to keep an eye on our resource page. We are going to just pack that so full.
So everybody knows Steve Primo. He recommended this book to look into, and it's the handbook pricing and ethical guidelines.
And who's the author?
It is by, it just says 16th edition. I think it's a bunch of people.
Oh, okay.
Graphic Artists Guild. And I haven't read through the whole thing, but it's got actually a lot of different artists' experiences, and then they have sample contracts throughout for different types of contracts, and like a service retainer agreement, digital media invoice, estimates and confirmation form.
Maybe drop that. Can you type that into the chat?
Yeah.
And then whoever even watches this in the future has that as well.
Yeah.
But I do know there's contracts, for instance, you know, that those are one of the things that I've gone and looked for out on Pinterest.
Yeah, and then, you know, Springboard for the Arts, that I think that booklet that we have, I don't know how they distribute those, if they're just to artists who participate in the workshops or organizations, but Springboard for the Arts has some sample contracts too.
Right, in their workbooks, and their workbooks are good. We're kind of expanding on them because they're kind of vague and we like to provide more specific resources. A lot of times.
Yeah, and that, yeah, but those are two like pretty jam-packed resources.
Yeah, no
I do think
kidding.
it probably would be worthwhile to, I know Serenity likes to write contracts. She's working on one for our little exhibit space at the office, so there'd be something to talk to her about, of having that like a little resources bar on the website. So
Yes.
ARAC's at like an interesting position right now because we're getting a new executive director and we have a relatively new board and double the staff, including
A whole
me.
shift, and yeah, we went from living on Zoom to all of a sudden there's so many people in the office. It's wonderful and exciting, and we're adding new programming and just looking at, Mary and I, we're very exciting to get the programming set for the next year beginning in July. And then we can plan our outreach and even more workshops, and hopefully workshops in real life. So, and hopefully I'll have more of a voice by then.
Well, any other thoughts, questions, concerns, suggestions? This is a very like work in progress workshop series because, yeah, I just got hired here recently. So I was like, I'm going to talk about some stuff and see, you know, how to engage the community more with this. We'll probably, I think this might be a good one to post on social media or something to that effect, because I know there was a lot of people who were interested in asking for the recording. So
right. So we're going to be pretty transparent with those things as well. So, and I put my email in the chat if anyone has any questions. You know, it doesn't have to be specific to ARAC. We really want to be a resource to everyone, whether you're applying for grants or not. And if we don't have answers, we can generally point you in the direction of people who do.